It was a tragedy that shocked the island of Jamaica over 40 years ago. In this video, I look back on the life of Immaculate Conception High School student Dianne Smith in the year 1983. I will look back at her birth, death, the arrest, the court cases that followed, the controversies, and the outcome. Plus, I take you on a visit to her grave. I am Nigel D. Salmon. Hit that subscription button. You're watching Jamaican Chapter. This is her, 14-year-old Dianne Smith. The year was 1983, and she was a student at Immaculate Conception High School, a Roman Catholic high school for girls. She was doing well in school, and her future looked bright. Dianne Smith was born on May 11, 1968, to mother Etta Smith and father Cedric Smith, a businessman. She lived with her siblings and parents on Old Stony Hill Road, Stony Hill, St. Andrew. Needless to say, it was from this address that she walked to school every school day. The morning of Wednesday, May 4, 1983 was no different. Dianne woke up, had her breakfast, and after some usual activities at the home, got ready for school. At about 6 a.m., she walked out the house wearing her white uniform, blue necktie, blue socks, and a pair of brown shoes. She also had with her a blue book bag with her textbook and other small things. Dianne was used to walking. She usually just walked to Immaculate Conception High School from her home. Sometimes she walked in the company of her siblings. Other times she walked alone. On that day, May 1983, she was alone. Normally, when she reached the intersection of Old Stony Hill Road and Long Lane, she walked through this track. The track or shortcut you see in this photograph was the track Dianne entered on that tragic day. Maybe someone was secretly observing her routine. But unknown to the 14-year-old Dianne, after walking into this track on that early Wednesday morning, she would not be seen alive again. After 8 a.m., classes at Immaculate Conception High School began, and Dianne was absent. Her friends at school, her classmates, thought she was not coming to school that day. Her mother, Etta Smith, was at home thinking her daughter was already in school. Around 9 a.m., a man named George William was looking for his cows when he came across the grisly sight in a gully in the Constant Spring area. It was the lifeless body of Dianne Smith. Within minutes, there was a crowd, then the police. In this photograph, the cold body of Dianne can be seen sprawled at the bottom of the gully. Her school uniform defiled, her young body violated, and her shoes and the blue book bag lay nearby. The crowd on the side of the man-made gully looked at this young victim with mixed emotions. This tragic event was to be the hot topic among many Jamaicans for days, weeks, and months to come. As news of the brutal murder spreaded and individuals expressed mixed emotion of shock, anger, and horror, the office of the Prime Minister did not keep silent on the matter. Prime Minister Edward Seaga sent a letter of condolence to her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, on Thursday, May 5, the day after the incident. Mr. Seaga directed the Commissioner of Police, Joseph Williams, to take every possible and urgent action to find the killer or killers who had committed the brutal and savage act. Dr. Mavis Gilmore, Member of Parliament for West Rural St. Andrew, the constituency in which the crime happened, visited Dianne's school the day after the murder. She gave words of encouragement and motivation to the staff and students, as well as relatives of Dianne, and presented the letter of condolence from the Prime Minister to Dianne's parents. Dr. Mavis Gilmore said, "If Dianne's life is not to be in vain, we should consecrate ourselves to all the great causes for which she lived." The crime was investigated by the Constant Spring Criminal Investigation Branch, CIB, and detectives from the homicide section of the CIB headquarters. The day of the murder, 2 men were detained for questioning. In total, 6 men were detained by the police in the early weeks of the intense investigation. Among the 6 men detained were a snow cone vendor. The day before her death, Tuesday, May 3, 1983, Dianne was on the street when she saw a photograph of herself on the cart of the snow cone vendor. Dianne did not take this lightly and ripped her photograph from the cart. This incident was witnessed by other students of her school. After Dianne was murdered on the next day, the snow cone vendor automatically became a suspect. But after being detained and questioned by the police investigators, it was determined that he has nothing to do with the murder, and he was released. 32-year-old Dennis Jenkins, also called Shorty, a laborer of Cassava Peace St. Andrew, was detained for questioning within 24 hours after the crime. He was picked up by the police in Constant Spring. He became a suspect because witnesses saw him in the vicinity of the crime on that Wednesday morning. One of the witnesses was Diane's brother, Christopher Smith, who walked past Dennis Jenkins on May 4, close to where the body was later found. Dennis Jenkins spent 10 weeks in jail before he was charged for the crime. Within the first day in jail, he was beaten by other prisoners who also threw water on him after learning what he was in jail for. Dennis Jenkins was subjected to having semen swabbed from his penis, blood samples taken from him, as well as hair from his head and pubic collected for potential evidence. Police also took from his residence a number of clothes, shorts, pants, and briefs as part of the investigation. Dennis Jenkins was formally charged on July 23, 1983 for the and murder of Dianne Smith. Leroy Wallen would be another suspect detained for questioning. Leroy Wallen was at the time in his early 30s and worked as a bus baggage man. He was living on Paradise Street, Kingston. On May 5, 1983, the day after the murder, Leroy Wallen was walking along Stony Hill Road near to Stillwell Road. A detective who was driving found the 33-year-old Leroy Wallen suspicious. He stopped the car, searched Wallen, and found an ice pick. Leroy Wallen was taken to the Constant Spring Police Station. He was taken into custody that day for the ice pick. He was released the next month in June 1983. On Monday, August 8, 1983, he was arrested in Anata Bay, St. Mary on a warrant by the Constant Spring Police and charged for the and murder of Dianne. So 6 men were detained. 4 of them were released, and only 2, Dennis Jenkins and Leroy Wallen, were charged for the crime. Preliminary hearing began on February 6, 1984. The last date of the preliminary hearing was on Monday, May 28, 1984. After hearing depositions from some 17 deponents and submissions from defense attorneys Mr. Bert Samuels and Mr. Jack Hines, as well as Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions Mr. Darrell Wilcott, the judge, Mrs. Shirley Lewis, ruled on May 17, 1984, that a prima facie case had been made out against both accused and committed both men, Leroy Wallen and Dennis Jenkins, to stand trial in the next session of the Home Circuit Court. Although stating that there was sufficient evidence for a jury to decide, Resident Magistrate Mrs. Shirley Lewis noted that the case was not one of the strongest she had seen. Leroy Wallen's attorney, Jack Hines, successfully applied for bail during the preliminary hearing. The bail was granted by the judge in the sum of $2,500 with one surety and with the condition that Leroy Wallen report to the Annata Bay Police in St. Mary on Tuesdays and Fridays before 6 p.m. Mr. Bert Samuel made an application for bail on behalf of his client, Dennis Jenkins. The bail application was denied. However, bail was granted at a later date. The trial was set to begin on September 17, 1984, but actually began on September 24. During the trial, prosecution witnesses include Christopher Smith. Christopher Smith was the 13-year-old brother of Dianne Smith and a student of Kingston College. He identified Dennis Jenkins as the man he had seen in the track close to the location the body of her sister was found. He said he saw Jenkins before in the same area picking ackies and had also seen him in Constant Spring. Mrs. Etta Smith, mother of Dianne, also testified. She said she was at home when she received a report from her brother-in-law, Delroy Hamilton, as a result of which she went down to the intersection of Old Stony Hill and Stillwell Roads. She saw Sister Maureen Clare, headmistress of Immaculate Conception High School, where Dianne was a student. The headmistress told her about the murder of Dianne, and Mrs. Smith said she immediately fainted and later woke up in Medical Associates Hospital. Mrs. Smith said 3 days later she saw the body of her daughter at Madden's funeral home. George Williams was the man who found the body. He testified that at about 9 a.m. he went up to Waterworks but did not see his cows where he left them, and he began searching for them. During his search, he came up on the body in the gully. He ran and told a Chinese man who made a telephone call to the police. He said he went for a ladder, which the police officers used to go into the gully. Mrs. Yvonne Cruikshank, government analyst, also testified for the prosecution. She said that the vaginal smears taken from the body of Dianne Smith and the penile smears taken from the two men charged with her murder contained gonorrhea. Mrs. Cruikshank said that in the vaginal smear she found numerous red cells, spermatozoa, and many pus cells. The pus cells were part of the deposit and were not generated by the deceased. Mrs. Cruikshank, who visited the scene on May 4, 1983, when Dianne's body was found, told Mr. Justice Malcolm and the jury of observations she made and of tests she carried out on certain exhibits. She told the court that when she visited the scene, she saw the body clad in a white uniform, blue necktie, and a pair of brown socks. There were several circular wounds in the chest region. The tie was knotted around the neck, and the deceased uniform was raised above the waist. There was a pair of red panties, a sanitary napkin, and a blue book bag next to the body. Mrs. Cruikshank further said that there was a pair of brown leather shoes at the scene, and when she examined them, she found a strand of hair adhering to the inside of the right shoe. There was a mixture of blood and semen on the uniform skirt, Miss Cruikshank said, and the finding of the semen indicated recent sexual activity. The blood found on Dianne's uniform was Group O. It so happened that blood samples taken from Dennis Jenkins and Leroy Wallen were also Group O. It must be noted that Mrs. Etta Smith, the mother of Dianne, had disclosed that Dianne was menstruating at the time she lost her life. The defense bored so much holes in the prosecution case using their only witness, Mr. Daniel Nippes, an American forensic scientist. Mr. Nippes revealed so much faults in the claims made by government analyst Yvonne Cruikshank that the jury was, in my opinion, confused. There were testimonies, objections, contradictions, just pretty much the way a court trial works. The trial began on September 24, 1984, and over the different court dates, the trial lasted for 10 days. On October 5, 1984, Dennis Jenkins and Leroy Wallen were to know their fate in the home circuit court. It was the day of the verdict. From 9:30 a.m. in that Friday morning, hundreds of spectators lined the Barry Street and Temple Lane intersection and the intersection of Temple Lane and Tower Street to hear the outcome of the case. The crowd had a mixture of emotions. Some were hoping for, and many were hoping against the accused men, while others were just curious. A detachment of police officers were out keeping the crowd under control. Inside the courtroom, where there was a permitted amount of spectators, activities were gradually moving to the point of a verdict. Acting Deputy Director of Public Prosecution, Mr. Glenn Anjade, and Acting Assistant Director of Public Prosecution, Mr. Mahadev Dukaran, led the prosecution. The prosecution relied heavily on the following circumstantial evidence. Statements from Mrs. Yvonne Cruikshank, government analyst, that A. The strand of hair taken from the left hand of Dianne's body and pieces of hair found on her skirt were all similar to head hair taken from the accused, Dennis Jenkins. B. The pubic hair found in Dianne's shoe was similar to the sample of pubic hair taken from Dennis Jenkins. C. 3 pieces of hair were found on Dianne's slip, and one of those was similar to the sample of hair taken from Leroy Wallen. And the testimonies of the 3 witnesses who claimed they saw Dennis Jenkins in the vicinity where Dianne was murdered on the early morning of Wednesday, May 4, 1983. The defense for Dennis Jenkins was led by attorneys Bert Samuels, Miss Donna Parchment, and K.D. Knight. Leroy Wallen was represented by attorney Jock Hines. With the large crowd outside the Home Circuit Court on Friday, October 5, 1984, the prosecution made its closing statement to the jury. The defense also gave its closing statement, and the judge, Mr. Justice Malcolm, summed up the case to the jury. The case was thereafter handed to the jury for deliberation. Outside, thick dark clouds in the sky began sprinkling rain sporadically. 3:42 p.m., the jury left the courtroom and went into a separate private room to decide the verdict. Up to 5:30 p.m., the jurors were still deliberating. At 5:55 p.m., the jury of 4-man informed Mr. Justice Malcolm that they could not arrive at a unanimous decision. The jury had to come to a unanimous decision on guilty or not guilty for each accused man. But this was not happening. After further directions from Mr. Justice Malcolm, the jurors went into their second deliberation, and at 6:25 p.m. they returned, still divided. The trial then ended with a hung jury. The jurors were discharged from their duty. At this point, Mr. Dennis Jenkins and Leroy Wallen could be set free. But Acting Deputy Director of Public Prosecution Glenn Andrade was very upset by the performance of this jury and was not willing to drop the case. He even asked Mr. Justice Malcolm to ban those persons from ever serving as jurors again in Jamaica. Of course, this never happened. Mr. Justice Malcolm ordered a retrial. The retrial was set to start on Monday, March 11, 1985. The defense attorneys made an application for a change of venue for the retrial on the ground that prejudice against the 2 men was so widespread and pervasive in the corporate area that they could not have a fair and impartial trial by jurors due to the hostile spectators on the streets outside the home circuit court. The accused men also claimed that they could not get a fair trial in St. Mary, Clarendon, St. Catherine, and St. Thomas. Abusive remarks made by spectators at the previous trial was also referred to. The judge, Mr. Justice Wolfe, refused the application for a change of venue. The defense then applied to the Constitutional Court for the change of venue, and the application was also dismissed. Between May 11 and May 27, 1985, there were few adjournments for different reasons. Eventually, the retrial began on May 27, 1985, in the Home Circuit Court before Mr. Justice Wolfe. 6 men and 6 women made up the jury. Dennis Jenkins was represented by attorneys Mr. Earl Whittle, Mr. Bert Samuels, and Mrs. Jacqueline Samuels Brown. Leroy Wallen was represented by attorneys Jack Hines and Mr. Hensley Williams. The prosecution was led by Mr. Ken Pantry, Acting Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions, and Mr. Mahadev Dukaran, Acting Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions. Presiding judge was Mr. Justice Gordon inside the Home Circuit Court. Dennis Jenkins was now age 34 and Leroy Wallen age 35. The attorneys for Leroy Wallen made a no-case submission to the judge, Mr. Justice Gordon. After hearing out the no-case submission from attorney Mr. Jack Hines, Mr. Justice Gordon agreed to it. He said, "All we have in this case against Wallen is a series of suspicious events, and suspicion is not sufficient for the Crown to ask you, the jury, to return a verdict adverse to Wallen. I have a duty to perform." He then directed the jury to return a formal verdict of not guilty. Leroy Wallen was then free to go. His acquittal was met with applause from spectators inside the courtroom. A free man, Leroy Wallen quickly left the courtroom. Attorneys for Dennis Jenkins, the only accused left on trial, also made a no-case submission on his behalf, but it was rejected. This meant that Dennis Jenkins' fate was up to the jury. It was Thursday, June 13, 1985. The 14th day of the retrial, and also the last day. Without going through the long details of what the defense and prosecution said in their closing statements, let us skip to the jury. The jurors were instructed by the judge to return a unanimous verdict of guilty or not guilty of murder. The 6 men and 6 women who made up the 12-member jury went into deliberation. After 3 hours and 10 minutes, the jurors returned with a unanimous decision. The Gleaner quoted Dennis Jenkins as saying, "Judgment time now. Judgment time." The 5 feet 2 inch Dennis Jenkins, also called Shorty, sat in court as the verdict was read. Not guilty of murder. It was a long legal battle which was followed closely by many individuals and the press. At the end of it all, the 2 men who were accused felt a sense of relief. They could go back to their normal lives. But the suspicion and criticism did not simply go away. Many individuals in the general public still believed the men did the crime, while others had accepted the decisions of the court. Some individuals were suspicious of something else: the cost on the side of the defense. The 2 accused men were very poor, but they were represented by not just one attorney each, but multiple top attorneys. Poor people cannot afford top attorneys such as K.D. Knight, Bert Samuels, and Earl Witter. But these top attorneys were out in full service to the case. So, who paid them? Also, who paid the forensic scientists from the United States of America? Who paid the fees he charged, his flight and accommodation? Suspicion of government official involvement came into being. A small number of individuals wildly accused this man of committing the crime. Darrell Vaz, son of the then Minister of Industry and Commerce, Mr. Douglas Vaz. Of course, the accusation was unsubstantiated. The funeral for 14-year-old Immaculate Conception High School student Dianne Smith was held on Thursday, May 12, 1983 at the Holy Cross Catholic Church on Halfway Tree Road. The funeral was conducted by the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Kingston, Reverend Samuel Carter. The funeral started at 3 p.m. and the church was filled with family, friends, sympathizers, journalists, and classmates from Immaculate Conception High School. I am at Dovecot Memorial Park here in St. Catherine, and this is the cemetery that the young Dianne was buried, that her attacker put her before time, killing her dreams and killing the generation that was to come through her. Okay. Yeah. So I'm walking now to her resting place. And this is her tombstone here at Dovecot Memorial Park. Of course, Dianne was a victim of more than just one type of attack. She was a victim of because she was stabbed, she was strangled. And this is a resting place here. On her grave it says Dianne Christine Smith, be calm, my soul, God will keep thee. She was born May 11, 1968, and her life brutally came to an end on May 4, 1983. A senseless death. What could be so beneficial in that to the point where you actually do all of that horrible things? Until today, no one was convicted and imprisoned for her death. And not just about someone being convicted and imprisoned, but that the killer or killers get caught. Because putting someone in prison for a crime does not mean that the crime was solved. The crime is solved when you find the perpetrator. And this was so senseless. So senseless. So this is the resting place of Dianne Christine Smith. And beside her is her father, Cedric Dudley Smith. On his grave it says, Cedric Dudley Smith, he gave so much and demanded so little. Born March 23, 1938, died November 14, 1991. So he died like about 7 years and some months after the death of his daughter. And the both of them are resting beside each other here at Dovecot Memorial Park. Her story is very popular. Many people still remember how viciously she was killed. So everything was shattered that day. Her dreams, what she was to become, her contributions to life, the generation that was to come through her, everything just shattered by the act of a criminal. It's very senseless targeting and killing of this young girl. This story was requested by one of my subscribers, and I'm very proud to bring this story. It's a story that's very sad. She's here with her dad in the afterlife. Again, thanks for watching. And remember to subscribe, like, comment, share the video. And I'll see you again in another interesting video like this.